everyone. Welcome to the Global Book Network. I'm Christine Blanchette, and I'm honored to have as my guest Michael D. Schottland, who has a 5 decades career as a lawyer, and he's the author of the book Trying for 55 Years. Michael, and I'm delighted to have him here to talk about his book. And welcome, Michael. And I see your book, you're holding it up. I love the
Yes.
cover. So tell us about the book, Trying for 55 Years, as opposed to 25 years.
No, it's 55 years, all right. And it covers my career of active practice as a lawyer in primarily Freehold, New Jersey, in Monmouth County, New Jersey. And started as a country lawyer in a small law firm. The law firm grew to many, many lawyers. We had a couple of famous cases that expanded the law firm. And I was busy for 55 years doing cases, all kinds of cases that you might expect a lawyer to run into or to come across in his career. And somewhere along the line, around year 25, I started to write the book. I had an idea because I felt that I was getting more than my share of interesting cases. I don't know why, but I did. And these cases were all over the place. I mean, all kinds of possible cases. I had cases involving the Vietnam War. I had cases involving institutions like teaching cases. I represented several teachers' unions. So I had several of those cases. I had some criminal cases. I used to do a lot of criminal work. Uh, Unfortunately, criminal work in Monmouth County, New Jersey, wasn't that lucrative, or it had a problem, and that was that the judges used to interfere to see the result that they wanted. And that used to aggravate me because I felt many times the judges interfered with the case by the jury. In other words, a criminal case is a jury trial. You're trying a case. You want the judge to be a neutral, impartial arbiter. When he's not, and he starts telling the jury in their own way how they should come out on the case, it gets to be very unnerving, to say the least. And as a result of that, I saw a lot of that happening. And in fact, I have two, for instances, I can give where the judges actually caused a conviction. And then in both cases, they gave my clients suspended sentences because they knew that I would appeal them if they sent the client to jail. And they didn't want to do that because they knew they'd get reversed. And two cases like that. And at the end of that run, I dropped out of doing criminal cases and I moved on to civil cases. Which are a lot more lucrative, but they're less challenging in a sense. And then I start doing malpractice cases. And I ended up having a bunch of cases in the Supreme Court of New Jersey where we actually changed the law to win the case. I had a very famous case that was on television in New York and on television all over the United States. It's called the host liability case. That's the case where it established a law that if a driver was at a private house doing, like, let's say, a house party, and he ended up imbibing, the host gave him booze. He went on the road and he caused an accident, injuring an innocent third person. That third person could bring an action against the host for damages. New Jersey was the first state to do that. That was in 1982 that I won that case in the New Jersey Supreme Court. And boy, did I get a lot of stuff about that. It was like I ruined everybody's summer or whatever you're talking about, everybody's party. And that I followed that with another case where we did it with an underage drinking, where they served an underage child at a private house. Child goes out on the road and causes an accident. That victim can sue the owner of the house. Those were the cases on that. But that was what I did, and that kind of stuff. And that's why I wrote the book. So I started writing the book at year 25, and it actually paralleled my career. And I finished writing the book, and I said, you know what, I'm done. So I quit. And that's what happened.
Well, congratulations. And I do love the cover. I see the lawyer hold like a balancing act, right? But Michael, like you're shining a light behind the scenes, right? Like what it is to be a lawyer and the cases. Like how many cases have you done and what
You know, I
has
know something. I don't know. It's a lot. In other words, over 55 years, you can do an awful lot of cases. I mean, the average case can run about 3, 4, 5 days of a jury trial. I'm talking about jury trials.
right?
You okay? You
Yes. Oh, yes. It's just my
I'm causing you to cough up.
no. Well, we'll get this edited, so I am so sorry.
That's
Um,
okay.
so no, I did like so. I guess like the cases that you put in the book. How did you pick the ones that you think that would be?
Well, all the cases that are in the book are unique cases, meaning that there's only one of them. In other words, I have a couple of malpractice cases in the book. Those are cases which had terrible results for children and for people, where the doctor caused really significant and long-term, forever injuries or deaths. And these cases, they took an average of a week to 10 days to try. And one of the books has a child that was born with half a brain. In other words, the child. I'm gonna put the book down. I'm getting tired
Yes,
of holding the
yes, you
one out.
can.
Anyway,
Well, I read about the web foot. Is that correct? That was a
yeah,
big,
that's the
yes.
case. Yes, that that case was like it was almost like an honor for me to do the case. What I mean is, number one, the people who suffered this, the mother and her husband who suffered this, whatever you want to call it, this tragedy, they were lovely people. They were wonderful people. They had no right to have this happen to them, and yet it did. And the case took everything, but I had the opportunity to meet two of the smartest, most wonderful doctors I'd ever met, for sure. One was in Chicago and the other was in Texas, Dallas. And no, not Dallas, San Antonio. Anyway, I had to go there to take depositions in the case. So, I mean, the case was a countrywide case. Started in New Jersey. Depositions of the doctors were taken in these cities, and then the case was settled in Freehold, New Jersey, Monmouth County, New Jersey. And the long and the short of it was a case in which the people they couldn't have a baby, so they went for in vitro fertilization. When you do an in vitro fertilization, the chances of having a multiple pregnancy are
Mhm.
way off the chart, very high. When you get a multiple pregnancy with a woman who needs help getting her pregnancy going, you're going to run a substantial risk that you're going to have to cut out a couple of the kids, because the number you get, usually the woman's uterus is not going to be able to carry to term. So you're getting situations where you have a triple or a quadruple pregnancy. You have to go in and cut out 2 or 3 of the babies. And they use a drug that they shoot into the heart of the baby. In this case, it appears that the doctor missed the heart and hit the brain. So he squirted poison into the child's brain. And instead of killing the child, he injured the child grievously, where the brain was interrupted its development, and the child only developed a half a brain, literally half a brain. The case was because the doctor didn't do anything to terminate that pregnancy. In other words, the doctor should have insisted that he had to pull that child and do a second abortion and remove that child. So the case was a wrongful life case, meaning that the child should never have been permitted to go to term and be delivered as a normal child, because it wasn't a normal child. It was born and immediately went into some kind of a seizure. They had to hit it with medication. They saved the baby, and the baby lived 7 years. And if you saw what they had to do to have this baby survive, the effort the parents had to make so the baby survived, it's incredible. And I sued the doctor, and the doctors I had were fabulous men who just they believed in the case. The one doctor was a OBGYN specialist, and he talked about this doctor not removing the child, not stepping in at week 18 and terminating the pregnancy. They never even discussed it. And he made it sound like the baby would almost outgrow the debility. And he gave the woman the wrong advice. The baby was born grievously disabled. I mean, really having half a brain. And so that doctor opined that the doctor committed malpractice in how he treated the problem once he discovered it. Then you had to relate the debilities that the baby had to the procedures. So I had another specialist on that, and that was the smartest guy I ever met. And he was a Chicago White Sox fan, and I remembered that because I'm a Boston Red Sox fan. I remember when we ate dinner in Chicago, where he lived. He was at the University of Chicago school, where he lived and worked. He was talking about the Chicago White Sox constantly, and I had to listen to that as a Red Sox fan. But notwithstanding that terrible thing, he did a wonderful job. And the web foot part of the case that you remembered, it's very interesting you remembered that. In order to relate the accident and the story, he had to be able to relate the web foot to the injection. And he had never seen that problem with a disabled child. In other words, he hadn't seen it before, so he was reluctant to blame the doctor as causing it. And yet it was one of the group of disabilities the baby was born with. So what happened was, it was an incredible feat of luck on my part. And that's what it was, an incredible feat of luck. I don't take any credit. turns out that when you have a amniocentesis, I don't know if you've ever heard that phrase.
No, I haven't.
It's a pregnancy phrase, and it talks about a procedure in which you pull fluid from the fetal sac of the baby, and you're checking it for some sort of a debility that is reflected in the amniocentesis part of the pregnancy. And you do that at week 11 of the pregnancy. You do that test. You pull fluid out of and what they discovered, the article that was written, was that when they do that procedure, they produce a web foot on occasion. And that's the only source of getting a web foot, except if you do this procedure where you're shooting fluid into the sac like you do when you're doing the abortion of the baby, where you're shooting fluid into the sac and into the brain, into the heart of the baby. That will produce, if you miss and you hit the head, you will produce the same web foot injury. Can you imagine finding that?
No,
I mean, it's off the chart in terms of the chances of me finding that. And I found it. And I sent the article to the doctor in Chicago. We had it translated for him. It was in French.
yeah.
We translated it.
Wow.
And anyway,
She,
think about the chances of finding that. When I sent that to the doctor, he picked up the phone and he called me and he said, after I read this, I could never not be representing this baby, saying his injury came from the doctor's injection. It definitely did. And I with a proof like that, with the amniocentesis as producing the exact same thing, because they do the amniocentesis at 11 weeks. Do you know when they did the abortion and the baby was shot in the head? 11 weeks. They did it exactly the same time they would have done the amniocentesis to do the abortion. Can you imagine that?
no, I mean, it's like,
It's off the chart. It's so that was that case that you remembered, the web foot.
it's fascinating. I mean, you're giving us, like, the readers, behind the scenes, what it's these incredible cases that have, it just hits you, and
How could you not write about that case?
exactly. And you've also, like, I mean, we have like about 10 minutes left, but I was thinking I wanted to talk to you about racing law.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Can you?
Um, I was one of the only attorneys in New Jersey who did racing law. In New Jersey had a pretty big racing scene. They had thoroughbred racing and they had harness racing. Harness racing, they put the straps around the legs and they sit in a bike. And the guy sits on the back of the bike and the horses race. That's harness racing. And thoroughbred racing, they're on the back of the horse. The jocks sit on that. That's what the Kentucky Derby was, and those kind of races. Well, this racing produces a little industry of its own because there's a lot of cheating that goes on, and the drivers or the riders are brought in for disciplinary proceedings, and they're brought in before judges, racing judges, and then the case turns into a case because the case goes from the racing law stuff, goes into disciplinary proceedings by the New Jersey Racing Commission, which is the licensure board, and that's where I come into the picture. I come in representing the harness driver or the thoroughbred racer.
Mm.
And some of the cases in that book are the most interesting cases you could ever see. You can't believe what would go on. I mean, just stuff like you can't believe. One of the cases, it's in the book King versus the Racing Commission. King was the name of my client. Coming down the finish line at Freehold Raceway, they said he pulled the horse, so he didn't win. In other words, didn't want the horse to win. That's what the Racing Commission said, and they charged him with throwing the race. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we tried the case before the administrative law judge, who's a person who's an employee of the state of New Jersey Office of Administrative Law. He's not a sworn-in judge, but he's a small town judge, and he acts as the final fact finder up to the Racing Commission. Notice he makes an opinion and sends it back to the Racing Commission with a recommendation. They then are supposed to act within 45 days and decide yes or no, this or this, and whether the guy gets penalized or not. This guy was given 7 months suspension for his penalty, or it might have been 9 months. I'd have to check. But
Yeah,
the
no.
case then went to the Racing Commission. The Racing Commission actually did this. They made up a phony hearing. They they notified me the day before the hearing where they were going to consider, and they had 4 members at the time, and only 2 showed up. So they didn't even have a quorum, and they affirmed the suspension. When I got the papers, I then filed an appeal to the Superior Court Appellate Division. That's the intermediate appellate court in the state of New Jersey. They ruled in my favor and reversed the conviction and said you can't suspend him because you didn't act within 45 days. You let the time run because there was no quorum of racing judges on the commission. They only had 2. They needed 3. Since they only had 2, what they did was a nullity. Since they did was a nullity, they didn't act within 45 days, not guilty. That was the appellate division. Unanimous opinion, 3 judges. The Racing Commission went to the Supreme Court of New Jersey with the case. They were so upset with the appellate division, and they were so upset with the administrative law judge that they weren't going to sit still to take the loss. The Supreme Court in New Jersey rewrote the law in New Jersey to find my guy guilty. In other words, they said if you tried within the 45 days to act and you didn't have a quorum, we're going to let you off the hook. You got a mulligan. And they gave the Racing Commission a mulligan. If you're a golfer, you know what that is. I don't know. Do you play golf?
No, I don't. But
The
we have.
mulligan
Hmm.
is a freebie. You gave him a pass, and they ruled against him, and they took his license away.
Wow, Michael.
And that's the case that's in the book at page 117. I know that because that's one of the only things I changed in the book. I changed how I wrote up what the Supreme Court did because I accused them of violating the Constitution in New Jersey by what they did. And I said, you didn't have a right to do that. That was not the law. It's not in the statute. The statute doesn't say anything about a mulligan on that. And
Yes.
they made it up, and bingo. So that's my favorite case.
And Michael, before we go, like, where can you get a copy of the book? And yeah, because we have like 2 minutes left. It's just, yeah.
Oh, it's you get it from Amazon, or you can get it at Amazon.
Okay, that's wonderful.
What's the other? There's another name of one of those podcast things
Uh,
where you can get it from my
from your website? From your website?
yeah, I have a website.
Okay,
You can get it there.
we can put that in for
Yeah,
sure. Yes.
yeah, because the publishers here, they could probably sell you one too, I guess. My publisher here.
Yes. Yes. Michael, I wanted to thank you so much for your time today. It went by so fast, and I I just enjoyed our conversation, and
Well, that's why I wrote the book.
I know
In
I
other
just
words, I'm
love
telling you
it.
this,
I just love it.
I don't know any other attorney who had all this nonsense. In other words, every one of these cases is you could do a storytelling with every one of these cases.
Yes.
I mean, some people might not like a case about a conscientious objector in the
Mhm.
Vietnam War or something like that, but you know, they all have some teeth to them. They all have some stuff
It's
in
it's
them.
it's fascinating, your book. I could speak to you all day, if I may say, but I want to thank you again for your time, and it was wonderful speaking with you. And I'm Christine Blanchette with the Global Book Network. See you next time.